This is Rush from Doors, and they are boring! I mean, I get why the most basic entity in the game should have a very basic design, but a lot more could be done to bedazzle this loser smiley face. Okay, I'm sorry, I didn't actually mean that. I actually really like the Doors entity models. However, I do think that some of them could actually be updated. Not to the extent where it's a massive visual overhaul, but little additions here and there to spice up their appearance a smidge. So, I have taken the liberty of revamping the appearance of a handful of Doors entities, and in this video I'll be showing you and explaining what I had done. So with all of that being said, let's begin. Alright, so the first entity I decided to revamp was Rush. Now, one of the things I really hate about the current version of Rush is its stupid particles. Now, in-game, these aren't really an issue, but when you take a look at the full model of this entity, you'll notice that its particles are squares. Why are they squares? They shouldn't be squares! It just looks so goofy. So, the first thing I did was immediately change the square particles to a circle, which just looks much cleaner. I also added a subtle black to blue gradient to these particles, so Rush has a tiny bit of more color than just being black and gray. This is a subtle change, but I do think it is a nice one. Now, something else you probably noticed is that there's a bunch of stuff just floating around Rush's remodel, and that is debris. You see, I always thought it would be really cool if one of the Rush variants had debris, like broken wood and glass floating around them like it was a tornado, as if they were moving so fast that parts of the hotel were being ripped off and pulled with them. So I decided that since Rush has a very basic design currently, I could spice it up by adding this debris tornado orbiting around them. I honestly think it looks really cool, and yeah, there it is. So in total, the changes I made to Rush is to replace its ugly square particles with a much cleaner circular one, and to give it something extra like a debris tornado which orbits around the model. Moving on though, the second entity I revamped is Ambush. The changes to this entity are a lot more subtle and small, but I do think they're really cool. Firstly, I added a dark green fog and glitchy particles behind the main face, as I felt like something similar to Rush should definitely be implemented for Ambush, where just anything, should be behind the entity's face. Although this change is rather small, I feel it adds a lot more depth to the entity, as now they don't seem so static but instead have a moving background of sorts. Additionally, something I really liked about Ambush were its old designs, particularly because they were much higher quality than the current one. You see, most Rush-like entities are intentionally made to have a pixel art style, and this wasn't always the case for Ambush, as its old versions were textured and had proper shading. Furthermore, the glitchy version of Ambush, which appears when you interact with a glitch fragment, uses a high-quality model rather than a pixelated one. So I decided to recolor Ambush's old models, combining them and editing them together, and make them the new appearance of the entity. However, I do still like the concept of a glitchy and pixelated Ambush, which is why I made it so every so often Ambush's face will glitch out momentarily, revealing its other version, meaning the best of both worlds are incorporated with this entity's remake. So, in total, the changes I made to Ambush were adding fog and glitch particles to their model, and replacing their face with a high-quality version with the chance for it to glitch out every so often, revealing their current face. Moving on, the next entity I decided to revamp was Seek. Now, I will admit that I mostly just updated this entity's model for fun, and I don't really think it should actually be updated in-game, but still, I'm just gonna tell y'all what I did. Essentially, ever since Seek was added, I always felt it was kind of weird how they were just a simple humanoid with one giant eye. Now, their model has grown on me since then, and I don't think it should change, but I decided to update their design to be more monster-like. For one, I replaced their hands with a claw, or, well, one hand with one claw, as claws look really cool, and I wanted to make the entity seem more disproportionate as they are made of this goopy substance. Next, I gave Seek a bunch of tentacles and hands which protrude out of its back. I just think it looks really cool, and it makes the character seem more than just a humanoid, which is why I added it, but yeah. I will say, though, that you probably shouldn't look at the backside of this entity. Yeah, it's a little wonky, because I didn't make the tentacles and stuff actually connect to Seek's back, but normally they would just be coming out of it. I also added a bunch of smaller eyes to Seek's stomach, as I thought one singular eye wasn't enough to represent an entity who's solely made up of eyes and black goop. So yeah, now those are there too. I would like to reiterate though that these changes aren't really based on what I'd like to see come to the game, as I personally think Seek's design is perfectly fine as is. But yeah, I just thought of updating it for fun. Lastly though, the final entity I decided to revamp was Timothy, which you probably didn't expect. Now, I had to upscale their model to make them actually visible, so just don't mind that they are huge. You see, something which always bugged me about Timothy is how they were a normal spider. One thing about doors is that all of the creatures in the game are fictional. Even something like Louie, who's 99% just a normal rat, was given the nose of a star-nosed mole and big bulging eyes to make them a fictional character rather than a normal animal. So, seeing how Timothy is the current only normal creature in the game, I decided to make them into a fictional one to match with everything else. I started by changing their eyes to be glowing red, as not only does it look a lot cooler than just their normal eyes, but the change from green to red eyes actually matched with another change I'll mention later. The second change I made to Timothy was to make it have a more red color scheme for its body. This one is quite subtle, but it does match the entity's eyes well, as well as the final change I made, and that was to put the modifier symbol on its back. Now, one of the most infamous spiders of our world is the Black Widow, most notable for the hourglass shape on its back, which invokes a sense of danger. I thought that concept was really cool, so I decided to do something similar for Timothy, but instead of an hourglass on its back, it would be the modifier symbol. This is because modifiers make the game a lot more challenging, and because the red light who's associated with the modifiers are evil or something, so their mark on this entity could make them a lot more feared, which I think is really good. Anyways, those were the 4 entities I revamped indoors. Now, obviously, I don't expect any of these entities to actually get remodeled in a future update, because their current designs are fine as is. But I thought this would be a fun experiment to try out and document. So with all of that being said, let me know in the comments how you would change the doors entities, and thank you all for watching, and I hope you enjoyed.